Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday, July 17th. I did not forget my commitment yesterday for a daily upload, but in the essence of time, and because seriously, y'all, like I've rearranged my whole schedule based around this fire that I have. I've been looking for a hobby or something to sink my teeth into, but to call this a hobby is it takes away some integrity from it. It's much more serious than that, but I also wanted to touch on that a little bit today. I'll give you a brief update about what's going on, and then I really want to get to the lighter side of things, because I realize this topic, which is the psychiatric industry, the truth and the reality about SSRIs, and especially benzodiazepine. I jump a lot of my content off to Dr. Yosef, that's with the J, at Tapering on YouTube. I feel he's probably the leader in the new corrected school of thought with psychiatry. I also, as I've said every video, I think he would have been censored a few years ago. He is so brutally honest about the truth of the dangers of these medications. And, you know, in my other videos, I've told you my whole story, how I got to be where I am. There is a current lawsuit pending against, when I started with them in November, they went by Neuropsychiatric of Atlantis. On the website now, they just say the Neuropsychiatric Clinic, and they're located in Villa Rica and Dallas, Georgia. And it is true that he has opened a new office in Florida. They had told me that when I first called, but and then afterwards, as we went along, I just didn't believe it. I thought it was one of the lies that they told, or an excuse that they made for him not doing at least the initial consult with his hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patients. So let me just briefly go over some highlights of the legal case. And not all of these are illegal or pertain to the case specifically. These are just red flags. But I will be, you know, according to what the lawyer is saying now, they have not been served yet, so I'm not releasing the name of the attorney yet. But y'all can go ahead on their website, Neuropsychiatric Clinic, Dr. Randy Warner. I didn't. I was just looking for a provider that would take my insurance. I wish I had stuck with the one that I had. That door is still open. I have a temporary new one, and I'll briefly go over some things to look for if you're looking for a new doctor, and what red flags. And, you know, I'll be honest with you guys. I've been on this journey with benzodiazepine for over 30 years. The past 7 years, I've taken the tapering process, and my health, my life, everything, radical lifestyle change. It wasn't even, I didn't even really decide to taper. It kind of came along. I was accidentally changing lifestyle habits. I didn't decide to do this, but you know, just by ways of meeting my husband, who was a chiropractor. He was really into bodybuilding, and like most chiropractors, they're just health nuts. You know, they really pay a lot of attention to diet and, of course, exercise, resting, healthy lifestyles. They usually approach things from a much more homeopathic standpoint. You know, and they know how to treat things naturally. As a matter of fact, they're more about curing stuff, you know, because, you know, look at, if you're on an SSRI, or especially on a benzodiazepine, I'm not coming for you. As a matter of fact, I feel that you need an attagirl or an attaboy because too many people have come for you and made you feel less than, have convinced you that you have some type of mental illness or chemical imbalance in your brain. This is my journey and my experience. Again, my disclaimer, I'm not a medical professional and I'm not a lawyer. I did run a women's group, Christian-based recovery group from 2013 to like 2016, which then stemmed off into, well, actually it was dual, men and women who were struggling specifically with benzodiazepine. And even then, that was like I said, 2013. I divorced in 2017. Yeah. So during that, that was kind of the tail end of the not even knowing what was going on with me with the benzodiazepine. I did not have a complete tolerance for the most part. Sometimes they would get stolen by a member of the household. I'd be out, whatever happened. And once that happens and you're not taking them for even a day, or especially a number of days, or you've gone into a withdrawal, when you return to taking them, you'll get that euphoric kind of feeling. And that's what you don't want. That's what trips up the addiction factor. I've known people to deliberately go without them, for days, to try to get that feeling again. And very, very intrusive on your tapering program. I'm here to talk to you if you're dead up serious about it, or you've had some serious trouble around it and you don't quite understand what may be happening to you, but especially the psychiatric industry. I have never had, since I started the tapering and lifestyle changes in 2018, when I met my now husband. We married in 2020. That's when I began to learn about what was happening to me. And my providers were not in the psychiatric industry. Every experience I've had, benzodiazepines generally are supposed to be prescribed only by psychiatrists, but that hasn't been the case in the 30 plus years I've dealt with them. You can basically get them, well, back then you could get them from absolutely anybody, from your OBGYN to your endocrinologist to your primary care, and SSRIs, you still can. They're slam dunks. But they are considered psychiatric psychotropic drugs. And you can see my video on how they came into being, when the institutions were kind of thinning out, and, they couldn't kind of lock people up because they were having a bad day. And out of all the specialties, they have the same requirements as any doctor does, and, then some, according, to what their specialty is going to be. But there really wasn't, starting like in the 60s or so, there really wasn't a lot of ways for psychiatrists to be lucrative. Your family doctors, of course, your specialties, your cardiologists, orthopedic surgeons, etc. Absolute necessities. They'll always be in business. They'll always have a job to do. I especially love cardiology because they kind of go for the cure. Their income and their whole reputation is based on keeping you alive and keeping your heart beating. So they're more inclined to cure your condition. Most of the medical field, the psychiatric field, being the most guilty of ongoing treatment. When, please see Dr. Yosa's videos as well, when there is an absolute cure, usually in the form of a plant or an earth-based medicine, and sometimes not even, just in simple life change styles. We've been medicating normal forever. Okay, now as far as the time crunch is going, I've kind of built this around, I have a pretty regimented daily exercise routine. At the moment, it's an 8-mile walk, and I throw in some laps in the summertime. We have a really nice pool. So between trying to do that and what I actually do for an income, and this now being my passion, when I ever started seeing the responses from y'all and, you know, looking on the Facebook groups and seeing how many people were going through this, it was mind-blowing. It is a unique niche, and that not everybody's going through that, thank God, and I'm so truly happy for you. There is some people on these medications or on benzodiazepines that are either on them without problem or they've come off them and barely noticed anything. This wouldn't be for you, or, you know, by all information. I mean, information is always good to have, but those are the people that I'm absolutely thrilled for. So the highlights as far as what led to actually seeking an attorney who jumped on this case. As you know, typically the psychiatric industry has been untouchable. There's still like insured malpractice insurance up to the gills. And I don't know of any where it's actually going to trial or arbitration. And you want to stay away from arbitration anyway. That's a way they just kind of suck you dry financially. Eventually, you're just going to run out of the time and energy to do that. It's not like a judge overseeing the case and, you know, a jury deciding it. So I'm unaware of any cases where it's gotten that far. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have heard of any cases where it's even been something we can bring them into court for. That is not the case anymore. But usually it's settled. It's settled before it gets to the point of arbitration or actual trial by jury. And you need to talk to your lawyer as to whether you have, most of the times it's been a successful civil suit. There are now some actions that are actually criminal, and you can file criminal charges. So the highlights on my case, like I said, I stay away from psychiatrists to provide the benzodiazepines at all costs. Sometimes you just get forced into it, depending on your socioeconomic status and your insurances. So also in pain management for one medication, you know, and they have to be able to communicate with the benzodiazepine is a whole different monster. You know, eventually I'll be able to taper off tramadol. That was another big lie of the pharmaceutical industry. When they came out, I remember I was working for a group of doctors, and they would drop off boxes and boxes and boxes of samples, and this was the non-addictive, non-opiate, new best thing to hit the market for pain. You could take up to 8 a day, and everybody did. You know, that took them until around 2014. Out of the blue, oops, our bad, it is an opioid. We're going to have to make it a classified drug now. And we're just lied to. And that's the hill that I am going to die on. Look, I'm one of those people. I'm sure it has to do with my childhood trauma, post-trauma, which again are just labels. You know, for the most part, I'm about as processed with that stuff as I'm ever going to be. But I would say out of everybody in my family that I grew up with, and I was only with them till I was 13 years old, but till this day, I can't not say something about the elephant in the room. And it's still absolutely like blows my mind when some, you know, either disaster happened or some misunderstanding or a lie, a bold-faced, provable lie, and nobody talks about it. As a matter of fact, they will carry on as usual, have a party, have a get together, make a phone call as though it never happened. Maybe it's me, because it seems like a lot of people do that. So maybe it's a fault or a personality disorder of mine. I can't tolerate it. And sure, I'm sure a lot of it comes from growing up in a household where, it was highly, highly abusive stuff, like my mother would have been jailed for today. But let me throw it in. My mother is deceased. I absolutely loved her. Amends were made later in life. Forgiveness was asked for, and it was graciously given. And by the time she passed away, we were in a mother and daughter relationship, and I was heartbroken to lose her. But that being said, the reality still is what it is. So, a lot of it was, especially, Mom, she had a thing about not talking about anything in front of other people. Sometimes the beatings were so brutal and visible. But even then, I think when somebody's abused like that, the harm comes not even so much from the abuser, but from the other adults, the other trusted adults in that child's life that did nothing. That did absolutely nothing. I remember one time, relatives next door, my half siblings, their biological grandparents lived right next door, and we consider them our grandparents as well. And after one particularly brutal beating, I know I hadn't even started first grade yet, and it was winter time. I remember all the blood on the snow, and running over to my grandmother's house, and there was an aunt that also lived with her, and trying to get away from her, and there was a lot of damage, like the right side of my then little face. I'm not doing poor me's either, guys. Like, I'm good. Trust me, I'm good. As a matter of fact, if you've gone through some stuff like that, I'm here for you. I'm here for you, and I am so sorry anybody would have to go through that. But the eye was completely closed. The brow was split. And it was just the right side of my face. It was very strange. And that there wasn't even any yelling or screaming or any other body part. Just boom, 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 boom. Don't know how many times. I just remember that bright red blood on the snow going next door. And it was the only time something was even said, and it wasn't enough. I remember she called her and was like, my mom's name, you went way too far this time, and my mother was like, I know, I lost my cool. Her actual statement was it should never, ever hit, always hit below the neck. That was her solution. And that seemed to be perfectly acceptable by these other adults. And then there was the gathering, where everybody was being really, really nice now because we had to devise a story for when Daddy got home. That's what started the beating. I know my father took off of work, and, this was horrible for him. Afraid. He had to go to work. He had a household to support. He had children to support. And he was afraid to leave me with my mother. It was only me. Out of the four of us, it was only me. So you would call consistently throughout the day. And on this particular day, she just kept hanging up the phone and then hanging it up. And she wouldn't answer the call. And she absolutely forbade me from picking up that phone. What reason would you possibly have? I was not hit at that point, for not letting me say hi to Daddy, or wanting to give him the reassurance, she's fine, focus on your job, But I was forbidden to pick up that phone, and every time she hung it up, he just called right back. That just made him more nervous and more suspicious that something might be going on, So she went to lay down, and I finally picked up the phone, and I just said, "Hi, Daddy." And he's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Is everything okay?" "Yeah." Until she got out of that bed. And that's when the phone was hung up and it was on. And there was several of those incidences, maybe not with those specific details. I just remember her being very angry at exposing the truth. Stuff that I would never think in a million years would be a problem. I was a smart kid. That's a fact. So it would just be little things like one year an uncle dressed up like Santa Claus and came around, and gave out little gifts to all the cousins and stuff. It was kind of sweet. Anyway, my little sister was a toddler. I think she was still in diapers because she was actually an infant because I was only like 4 or 5. And, everybody got a picture, would sit on Santa's lap. Uncle Johnny was an Irishman, a redhead. And even to my 4-year-old brain, it was so obviously Uncle Donnie and not Santa Claus. I still believed in Santa Claus, but I absolutely knew for a fact that wasn't it, and he wasn't it. And I remember thinking even at 4, like, that was so nice of Uncle Donnie to do, And so I'm getting my picture taken, and, he's ho, 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 and, handing out a little gift. And I said, "I know you're Uncle Donnie." My mother lost her shit. Like, lost her shit. "You have to ruin everything." And I was like, "I'm not a dum-dum, Mommy. It's Uncle Donnie." She goes, "No, you're not a dum-dum. You're too smart for your own good. You ruined it for your little sister." My little sister is an infant in diapers that can't even, get a picture on his lap unless he held her. I forget how that even went down. But stuff like that, to tell the truth was a big no-no. And so I grew up, and even after I healed and after I matured, I realized I adopted that and inherited that as a personality trait. And I think it's a good one. I'm offended by lies. Have I ever told a lie in my life? Damn straight I have, and I either got busted and had to admit it, or I took accountability and admitted it. But when other people do, okay, I'm forgiving to a point where I'm almost a sucker. Like, you could do something so, my mother's a perfect example, although it hadn't happened in, well over a decade by the time the family was I was reunited with the family. That's all it took. That's all it took. And I mean, I loved her as it was happening. It was just something we do. Stockholm syndrome, I don't know if that's applicable when it's a biological parent, but in any event, almost to a fault, but where I will get stuck, and I know it'll drive my husband crazy, like, let it go, 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 let it go. He's very, very good at that. I think that might stem from his own stuff in childhood. You just don't talk about stuff. And, plus I think, he's let a lot of offenses happen in his life that, and this is his right and his choice, it's his story, that he doesn't want to talk about. He doesn't want to address. And there are areas, he's grown a lot now, where he's saying, wait a minute, that was wrong, that was unacceptable, and he may not be the first one to go and address it, but he now at least has an expectation of an apology or a discussion, over something that, may have seriously hurt him. Guys, in the comments, if you can let me know this is driving me crazy. My husband said absolutely not. To me, I'm looking in the camera, and my right eye looks half closed compared to my left. I think that is so obvious. You guys, let me know what you think. But anywho, some of the first red flags with this provider that wound up with them about to be served. The first initial appointment, I knew, they did an intake. I made my needs and what help I was seeking absolutely clear, and what kind of provider that would be best for me. So they gave me the first provider. This young girl seemed nice enough, but I have something called BIND, B-I-N-D. It is an actual condition, a provable clinical diagnosis, that is benzodiazepine-induced neurological disorder. This is caused by a improper taper, too fast, and absolutely can be deadly with an abrupt cutoff. Benzodiazepine and alcohol are two drugs you cannot be abruptly cut off with, and without medical supervision, as grand mal seizures, they can kill you. It can just kill you. I think other drugs you might feel like you'll want to die coming off them. You're so sick, but that ends. It does not end with benzodiazepine. Sometimes even returning to the drug will not work. And there's pray tell little help out there, to do this properly. Most of us, and this is why I'm so grateful for the groups and for y'all, we're kind of, I have no right to give medical advice in the group. We shouldn't, but we do, because we don't have the right kind of help. And personally, since I've taken on this endeavor, I've done my research to back up what I know and even learned more facts. Like, 70 million Americans, and I think that might be a low estimate according to the NIH, are on either an SSRI or benzodiazepine or both. We prescribe more psychiatric drugs than any country in the world, yet our rates of self-deletion, major depressive disorder, these are labels that have been given, major anxiety disorder, ADD, you name it, bipolar. Unfortunately, what we did, I'm not negating anybody who has these diagnoses and really feels that they might be being helped by some of these medications, but I can speak for myself and now many, many others, thousands and thousands of you. In my case, it was the late 90s. I know for a fact we have been medicating normal. And it really does come down to money for the psychiatric industry. You're not going to have any problems whatsoever. Sorry, honey, I'm going to have to call you back. I just lost my train of thought when my husband called in. What we've done, there are some people, especially children, that are very, very hyper. I was one of them, just very, until mid-childhood, until like 7 on, and I became kind of a recluse and stayed in. But I remember as a toddler and a little kid, I was just into everything. I had to climb up on the counters and open cabinets and go through stuff. I'd go up in the attic, which was this big, giant museum to explore when you're little. There were all kinds of cubby holes and things to be crawled through and picked up and broken sometimes as a little kid. Today, that would be immediately in a 10-minute appointment with a pediatrician diagnosed as ADD, although they are tightening up the reins on the criteria for that. And they have also tightened up the reins, thank you, For Gen Zers, it's much more difficult to get benzodiazepines for any length of time. It's not impossible, and it should be. They were never, ever designed, but were they? For more than a few days at a major time of crisis. An example would be maybe a car accident, the loss of a loved one, particularly difficult, major life crisis, maybe for a week or two as a little crutch. Never beyond that. I don't know and have not heard of anyone out of these thousands of people that I now know that has actually been prescribed for a couple of weeks or a few days. Everybody I know that's ever been prescribed a benzodiazepine, it's been years and years. They could stop and go back on for years. It's a mess. It's a mess. But what I really want to do today is kind of lighten up. You can go back and see the prior videos. And, I'm telling you, this is especially for the men, because y'all are just more like anal, precise about this sort of thing. I am getting a tripod and a camera and a microphone and all that stuff, because the men in my life, my youngest son, my husband, I can't even get him to watch like the old Christmas movies that I love. It's a Wonderful Life. I love the original version, with the cracks in the film and, black and white. It would drive him. He's never watched it with me, because it has to be like top quality HD, high definition perfection. The better and bigger the screen. The bigger the screen, the better. The sound bar. It has to be on a particular number and look and sound a certain way, or it's almost literally like intolerable. It goes beyond preferring it. We all would prefer better quality with everything, especially healthcare. So that's coming. I'm looking at my stats, and women are by far the larger part of my audience. And why we're on that, please guys, in the essence of time, I'm switching off between like YouTube and TikTok, because I can go live on TikTok and it's a lot quicker. And you can interact right there on the spot. So I'd love to do that for YouTube. Look, guys, I am not here to win a popularity contest, get a bunch of likes, but I guess you need 100 subscribers to be able to do that. So please subscribe. I'm supposed to ask you to like turn on the notification bell. I don't turn any of mine on. I actually get angry when messages that I didn't ask to pop up while I'm busy concentrating on something else. It drives me nuts. But if you could just interact on any level, that's what this is really for. Any kind of comments, questions, especially about the now legal rights. Well, there have always been legal rights, but they're now actually being acted upon. Our patient rights, or if you suspect you might be being mistreated, meaning medication-wise, and especially benzodiazepine, you have to know what could happen, what does happen when you start them, and how utterly life-threatening. I'm not trying to scare anybody. These are just facts. I look back at times I didn't have them or was improperly tapered, including a hospitalization where I chose to do that. And they tried like in 8 days. I kid you not. After 30 years. And the sometimes permanent injury it can cause. But looking back at those times, I had things happen to me that I now know any doctor would instantly diagnose as a seizure. I remember a few times yeah, and this, you think of seizure and you think your eyes rolling up, and I was always told, put a cloth or something in somebody's mouth so they don't bite their tongue, and maybe jerking motions, and yes, that certainly can be signs and symptoms. I had, you tell me, you don't have to be a medical expert to kind of figure out something went wrong that kind of, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck. My jaw would tighten up in just spasms, like this. Like I couldn't move, couldn't talk. And at the same time, my saliva glands were working just fine, and I couldn't swallow. So literally, like saliva just falling everywhere out of my mouth, and it was really, really painful, like TMG only via electrocution, and it would stop. I may have mentioned that it happened to, a primary care in the next appointment, but, little things like that just happened. Sometimes maybe bigger things, a lot of times I'm hearing about people who had a seizure, didn't even know it. They thought they just woke up. There's one case that I know of where somebody seized so bad, they actually fell on the edge of a table, split their chin open to a point of needing stitches, laid back down on the couch, kind of came out of it, I guess, and everybody's gathered around him. They're getting ready to take him to the ER, and he had no clue that he was even bleeding or injured. So these things are real, and they happen. Let's get to that lighter note so I can wrap this up. Look, there is a way out of this. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is life even while you're tapering and experiencing some symptoms. There are ways to minimize those symptoms, and there sure as hell is a great life on the other side of it. I've had areas and times in life where they just weren't used, and for whatever reason, at those particular time periods and where I was in my tolerance level, I just experienced more ease. There are a lot of things you can do. I've done them to prepare for a taper. I did them totally accidentally, but number one, when I moved in with my husband, who I said, like I said, is a chiropractor, bodybuilder, health aficionado, his diet was very, very basic. No processed sugar, little to no gluten, no processed foods. I call them God foods. It has to come from an animal, a plant, a tree, or the ground. And that was the grocery shopping. That was what was available in the house, and that became my diet. I did notice my energy levels starting to come up, and all those little annoying things that would happen over the year, little sinus infection, just that constant state of not well-being, was getting a little better. And then, now this is not a plug for our business either, but there are 3 supplement manufacturers. It's not a plug for them. They're not sponsoring this, but you do have to have a medical license in order to even get that. We have built a website for, and we do sell them, and they would be and these are the supplements that we use: pure encapsulations, standard process, including their meta-herb line and even their veterinarian line, and we've recently added metagenics. And speaking of which, I'll just show you. I actually, I take like a woman's supplement pack, usually anything that enhances brain health, which is mostly like your omega-3s, your fish oils and stuff like that. But I now take this. It's called Plus One by Metagenics. And that's what it looks like, and the amount in the package. +1 means it's actually a prenatal. It's for women who are pregnant, trying to get pregnant, are pregnant, and nursing. So it is loaded with some good stuff. This is a trial basis. I was taking another Daily Woman's Pack, I believe from Pure Encapsulations. Most of what we have out there is from Pure Encapsulations and Standard Process that we take ourselves. But like I said, we just added Metagenics, and as I was listing them, I was liking a lot of what I'm hearing. They're available in the other companies as well. But if you're interested in that, we get them wholesale. We sell them on our website, which is betterbytheday.info. And go to my husband's chiropractic page, Dr. Shadler, supplement store, and then you can look up by manufacturer and then alphabetically. So that's just a side note. So along with this new diet, and also my entire family, heavy, lifelong smokers. I had stopped smoking, but I did resume, I start vaping. And I'm not bragging about that or recommending it. But in comparison to everything that you're getting in a cigarette, just the paper itself that it's wrapped in has like over 100 chemicals. You have all your insect shit that gets on the tobacco leaves, the filter part of it. So with the vaping, you're basically getting the nicotine. Again, so much of my life is about controlling and avoiding withdrawal. And again, nicotine withdrawal certainly is not life-threatening. It's life-bettering, but I'm not quite there yet. So I put down the cigarettes and used the vape. And then we started adding in the supplements, slow but sure. And then he brought my then 56-year-old butt to the gym and had me doing weight resistance. Very little cardio. He just incorporated that later on. When I first met him, he was into that level of bodybuilding where you literally set an alarm clock to wake up in the middle of the night to eat. You have to eat like I can see the phone shaking while I'm doing this. You have to eat every few hours to keep up and build a muscle. So today I've definitely found, for me, cardio is where I need to do a little muscle building as well, because I have osteo everything. I broke a hip and a leg in 23. I have some excellent supplements for that. Bone build. You can build bone density with these supplements. I gained about 13% on the bone builder supplement that I take. So incorporating, the diet, radical diet change actually, and putting the cigarettes down, the supplements, the exercise. Then I started, setting up an evening routine that gave a much better chance. Just always a lousy sleeper. And if you've ever experienced even minor withdrawal on benzos, the first thing to go is sleep. People have reported not sleeping in excess of 30 days. Yes, it is possible. Yes, it does cause psychosis. These aren't fun things to play with. But I was doing all these things in addition to finally having gotten out of a very, very toxic relationship. I want to backtrack on the blame dump on this guy. Oh, trust me, he deserves it. But a lot of it was I was in bind. I already had bind by that time. And a lot of this insanity, like as in just going back and 100 times, moving out with my young child, and then going back and forth, till a final, divorce in 2017, and still going back and getting back together. Very, very unhealthy, very unstable. So lifestyle on top of all these very poor health habits and the strains and stresses that went with that. I had a stepson. Literally, there was no safe place to hide your medications. You put them in a lockbox, man. He'd shamelessly just take the whole lockbox and like smash it open. Caused a lot of problems with the medication, and I wasn't aware of what I'm aware of now back then. So I met my now husband in 2018, dated for 2 years before we married. You know, keep in mind, you know, we're not kids. We were in our mid-50s by then, you know, but I had a tendency to jump right in and get married way too soon, you know, and they all ended in divorce. Yes, I was the common denominator. That's a whole another video, I promise. If you're interested, I'll put out. But this was tangibly different. You know, I thought initially this guy wasn't into me. He was very non-reactive, very calm, very, very left brain, you know, but has emotions and displayed emotions. And I had lived with such intensity and chaos. It was, you know, to me that looked like indifference. Au contraire. Au contraire. We have, we both have histories of childhood trauma. Both our stories are very different. We are very different. And for whatever reason, God saw it fit to make those differences complementary. And this is, at 62 years old, the longest relationship I've had without interruption. I've been, you know, I've been married, like, okay, it's single digits, guys. It's single digits, so, but a lot, okay? And I think I can safely say, oh, I know, I've never made it to a 5th year anniversary. It was something about that 3-4 year mark. You know, it had been building up the entire time because I married them too soon to begin with, in the name of Christianity. That's another video. But we will be celebrating, say for one of us passing, our 5th wedding anniversary in October. And we've been together 7 years with not one breakup. I'm trying to think of like major coming close to a breakup fights. Maybe 1 or 2, and they were over with within 24 hours. He's just incredible. I said it with everybody, you know, God sent this one for sure. God sent this one for sure. He seems to feel the same way. You know, he lives and behaves as though he's very happy with me and in his marriage. We've built a good life. We've built a really good life where we put God first and then each other, you know, and then family and then friends. You know, I've grown to a point where I had friends by default. I think I was just like so glad if you wanted to hang around with me and say good things about me. You know, I have boundaries. I have very, very healthy boundaries. I don't even have to be like all that pissed off and hate on you, you know, if you had wronged me in some way. But I'm perfectly okay with no communication. I recently had a very negative encounter with my sister. She came down with her husband and my beautiful grandniece. Oh my God. And I did get to spend the whole day with her alone, and it was just, she's just precious, like I'm getting a cuteness attack just thinking about her. But that went terrible, that entire visit. And it kind of came down to, you know, she's kind of sort of blocked right now, and I'm okay with that. As a matter of fact, I don't want to sound mean, there's almost a sense of relief. You know, things have been building up over the past few years, a lot of pressure. She, you know, she is very, 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 very controlling and demanding, you know, and thinks that she should be put above other things that are as equally as important, without a plan, without a promise, without a commitment. And anyway, the whole thing just backfired, and she did something really dirty on the day that we did spend together. You know, I'm just the end part of it is the plan was I was going to take them all out for a really nice lunch or dinner. The baby wanted to drive with me, so I unbuckled her, and my son was going to carry her over to my car. So I cooled it off. I'm waiting, where I noticed my son like isn't bringing her over, so I called. They're kind of like slowly driving away and saying they're going back to where they was staying. You know, she came down to see my son. That was obvious in where she chose to stay, you know, which I would have gladly paid for and covered a place to stay nearer to here. And, you know, we could have gone to where my son lives. And, you know, I would have gladly picked him up, and, you know, we could have worked it a million other ways that both of us should and could have had just a wonderful time. But she got it stuck in her head that she wanted me to come to where she was, an hour away, you know, and even blow off my stepson's birthday, in addition to my stepson's planned birthday. And it was a real special one. You know, he had just started med school, he's newly engaged, so it was a big one. And then the night before she were to arrive and the party, my husband, who has congestive heart failure, got a big attack of gout, which, if you know anything about, is extremely painful. This is a big, tough guy. And when he's telling you the pain level is like 5, it's our 10. It's our 20. And it was excruciating. And so much so, we didn't even make the party, which I think just pissed her off more in her mind. Well, you're not even going to the party. And I was already, she was already shut down by that point. It wouldn't have mattered if I went to the party, didn't go to the party. But of course I was going to stay home with my husband, who could not walk and should not be walking on it. And now I'm worried because the one thing that definitely was committed to was to go tubing with everybody the next morning. And I'm not wanting to leave my husband. We're going to go tubing the next morning, go out, and then they literally go past our exit on the way home. So my husband wanted to see her and see the baby. So, we wanted to take them out for brunch or whatever they wanted to do on the way home coming here. So I'm waiting for the baby to be put in my car, and she just splits. And she starts with the pressure for me to come to Rome, you know, and she already had it stuck in her head. Nothing was going to be good enough unless I went to Rome, and just made it all about her. You haven't seen you in 4 years. I'm your sister, and blah, blah, blah. Well, you know, I'm family. So is my stepson, and really so is my husband. And she wasn't being blown off in any way, shape, or form. She was not here to visit me, or she wanted to do it at her convenience and her way, which was very inconvenient to me. You know, she refused to consider the fact that I had to work. But anyway, so that was a big blowout. And, you know, it was getting into ugly texting. And I just decided, for now anyway, to block her. And then I was waiting for the rage, and then the sadness. These are human emotions, guys. These aren't things that need to be. This was situational. If you go to a psychiatrist, or even sometimes your primary care, you can get a pill for that. You don't need it. It was a situational emotion reaction to what was going on. And through the grace of God, I was able to bring that under control, make the choice to temporarily, I hope, block her. This is one that's just going to require an apology.